So looking at the circulation system, before we do this, we need to look at the thymus because we are going to take this off. So here's the thymus right here on top of the heart. Now the size of the thymus is kind of dependent on whether or not the rat has gone through puberty, just like in humans. So if the thymus is big and really covering the heart, you have a very young rat. But if the thymus is really kind of tiny and off the heart, then you probably have an older rat. So in order to see the aortic arch, we're going to have to pull this off very gently, and that will reveal the aortic arch that's underneath. The main focus for today is to isolate things, not just rip them apart, except taking the thymus off. So here's the heart right here. You can see the coronary veins. These are in blue right here. You may see the coronary arteries. Those are in pink. Remember, the rat has been dyed with latex in the arteries and veins. So veins are blue, arteries are pink or red. So here's the heart. These little flaps on top, they kind of look like Mickey Mouse ears right here. Those are the atria. Remember, it is the rat's left and right. So here is the left atria. Here is the right atria. We also need to look at the aortic arch and how things come off of that. So this right here, this big pink U-shaped thing is the aortic arch, right there. The first branch coming off is the brachiocephalic. The brachiocephalic then will branch off again. The right common carotid goes up the neck. The right subclavian goes off into the shoulder. So look for the aortic arch, brachiocephalic, right common carotid, and then the right subclavian. As we continue along the aortic arch, you have the left common carotid, and then underneath, probably underneath a big blue vessel, which we'll talk about in just a minute, is the left subclavian. Right? It does not have the same kind of branch as the brachiocephalic, so it literally goes left common carotid and then the left subclavian. So while we're up here looking, you can see these big blue ones off to the side. Those are you'll see the jugulars coming up next to up here, right up in this area. And then, of course, you have the cranial vena cava. Now, it's not called the superior like in the human. It's called the cranial vena cava. So the cranial vena cavas are coming in. This is going to wrap around the heart. See all that blue? Right in there. All that, cranial vena cava. This is coming from the bottom of the rat. This is the caudal vena cava. So this is the bottom, and we'll see that down below as well. So cranial vena cava coming down, caudal vena cava coming up, and they're going to dump into the right atrium right here. You need to know your terms. If there's a pin right here, up here in the shoulder, that's an axillary. So if it supplies blood to this region, it will be an axillary artery. If it drains this particular region, then it will be an axillary vein. If the arm is pinned, that will actually be brachial. So again, you will have to read the card and it will say if this area is being drained, it's the brachial vein. If it's being supplied, it's the brachial artery. But we're not going to actually isolate that and see that. When we look at where the aorta goes, you've already broken the ribs by now. Intercostal, that means ribs. So again, if this area is pinned, if it's supplying this area, it's intercostal arteries. If it's draining this area, it's intercostal veins. We can follow the aorta down. You can see the descending aorta. That's the pink one right there. Or you can move everything out of the way right down here and see descending aorta. But then right next to it, you can actually see the caudal vena cava. You also need to know your terms here. If it drains this area, it's called the hepatic vein. If it supplies this area, it's called the hepatic artery. Down here with the kidney, the renal artery is very hard to see quite often, so we'll probably just pin it and say if it supplies this structure, then it will be the renal artery. If it drains, big blue one right here, then that's the renal vein. As you follow the descending aorta down, it turns into the iliac, and you'll see a three-pronged structure. Now, sometimes that caudal is kind of stuck over onto the side, but you can see a three-pronged fork. Right? The middle one will be the caudal, and the outsides will be the iliacs. Iliac means hip, so it's going to come down here. Yes, we can pin these, so the iliac is the one off to the side. The one in the middle is called the caudal. If this particular area is pinned, it's called the femoral. So supplying this area, femoral artery. Draining this area, femoral vein. Pin the tail on the rat, yay! If this is pinned, if it is supplying this area, it's the caudal artery. If draining this area, it's the caudal vein. We also have to cut the heart open. So you need to do a transverse cut, find the apex of the heart, that is the tip of the heart. You're going to simply slice down. It is a little bit tougher than what you had to do with the stomach, so be careful with the razor blade. Make a transverse cut and open up the heart, and you should be able to see the chambers. The big muscular wall on the left is the left ventricle, and the tiny little, sometimes in blue, and sometimes you'll have red on the other side. Remember, the right side of the heart is deoxygenated, and the left side of the heart is oxygenated. So you may have to identify the chambers of the heart, or you may have to answer questions about whether or not it has oxygen.